At 7:27 p.m., she disappeared forever. The car was found. Maura wasn't. Every clue created even more questions. February 9th, 2004, a Monday, cold, gray, ordinary. Maura Murray was 21 years old, a nursing student at UMass Amherst, disciplined, athletic, a former West Point cadet who'd transferred schools but never lost the bearing, the posture, the precision, the control. People who knew her used the same words again and again: smart, driven, put together. But that morning, something was already wrong. At 1:24 p.m., Maura emailed her professors. She told them she needed to leave campus immediately. A death in the family. She needed the week off. There was no death in the family. Her sister Kathleen was alive. Her father, Fred, was alive. Everyone she would later claim to be mourning, alive, and completely unaware that Maura had just told the truth's opposite to the people overseeing her education. At 1 p.m., she'd emailed her boyfriend, Bill Rausch, an Army cadet. The subject line, "Hey, hey." She told him she loved him. She told him she hadn't felt like talking to anyone. She promised to call later that day. She never did. By 2:05 p.m., she was on the phone with a tourism line in Stowe, Vermont. The call lasted less than a minute. The reservation system was down. No room was booked. No destination was confirmed. At 3:15 p.m., security cameras at a Big Y Plaza in Hadley, Massachusetts, captured her at an ATM. She withdrew $280, nearly every dollar in her account. The footage shows her alone, calm, methodical. From there, she walked into a liquor store. Vodka, Kahlua, a nip of Bailey's, a box of Franzia wine, $40 of alcohol, purchased in broad daylight, hours before she would disappear into the New Hampshire woods. Then she got in her car, a Saturn, borrowed from her father after a minor accident days earlier, and she drove north, away from campus, away from her boyfriend, away from the version of her life everyone thought they understood. She was carrying blank accident report forms, picked up earlier that same day from a police station. Why a 21-year-old nursing student would need accident report forms on the same afternoon she'd lie about a death and drain her bank account is a question that has never been answered. At 4:37 p.m., she made her final recorded phone call to her own voicemail, 4 minutes long. No one knows who left those messages or what they said because the contents were never recovered. Somewhere between Massachusetts and the winding back roads of Haverhill, New Hampshire, Maura Murray stopped being a person anyone could account for, and the clock kept moving toward 7:27 p.m. Route 112, Haverhill, New Hampshire, a narrow twisting road that locals call dangerous even in daylight. At night, in February, with ice on the asphalt, it becomes something else entirely. At 7:17 p.m., cell records show Maura on the phone with Bill, her boyfriend, a call lasting roughly 20 minutes. 2 more short calls followed. Whatever was said in those final conversations, Bill has never publicly revealed the content in full. 10 minutes later, at 7:27 p.m., a local resident named Faith Westman looked out toward the road and saw something that didn't belong there. A car, nose first in a snowbank, lights still on. She called it in immediately. When asked what she saw near the vehicle, Westman described a figure, a man, she believed, smoking a cigarette. Her husband would later contest this detail. He remembered something different, not a cigarette. A red glow, the kind of glow that could come from a dashboard light, a flare, or something else entirely no one has ever identified. At 7:29 p.m., 2 minutes after the call, Officer Cecil Smith of the Haverhill Police was dispatched. By his own later account, and by the route logs, his drive to the scene would take somewhere between 15 and 18 minutes. That gap matters, because in those minutes, something happened that the official record still struggles to explain. At 7:42 p.m., a school bus driver named Butch Atwood pulled over. He saw the crashed Saturn and a young woman standing beside it. He asked if she was okay. "I'm just shook up," she told him. He offered to call the police. "No, please don't," she said. "I already called AAA." There was no cell service on that stretch of road in 2004. The AAA call she described could not have happened. It was, as far as anyone has ever determined, a lie. Told, calmly, immediately, to the last person who would ever speak with her. Atwood drove home. He called 911 at 7:42 p.m., describing her as visibly shaken but otherwise composed. And here is where the timeline fractures. A separate witness, identified in later investigations only as Witness A, reported seeing a police SUV parked nose-to-nose with a dark sedan at the crash site between 7:33 and 7:37 p.m. Officer Smith did not arrive until 7:45 or 7:46 p.m. If both accounts are accurate, then someone else, in a vehicle resembling a police SUV, was already at that crash site, face-to-face with Maura's car, 8 to 12 minutes before any actual officer arrived. No one has ever identified who that was. By the time Officer Smith's headlights finally reached the wreck, the car was empty. The doors were locked. Maura Murray was gone. Inside the locked Saturn, investigators found a strange, contradictory inventory. A snapshot of a young woman's life, frozen mid-sentence, a spilled box of Francia wine, an empty beer bottle, a red-stained soda bottle that some investigators believed showed signs of drinking behind the wheel, gloves, CDs, nursing school books, a stuffed animal, the kind of object that belongs to comfort, not crisis. MapQuest directions to Burlington, Vermont were also recovered. A printed route to a destination she never reached and may never have intended to. A rag was found stuffed into the car's tailpipe, a trick, according to her father, that he himself had taught her to stop smoke from escaping a faulty engine. A small practical detail, the kind of thing a careful person does, not the action of someone in the middle of a breakdown. And those blank accident report forms, the ones she'd picked up from a police station hours earlier. Sitting inside the car, unused, their purpose still unexplained. Her backpack was missing, her cell phone, gone. Her debit and credit cards, never used again, not once, in over 20 years. Outside the vehicle, the search teams found almost nothing. No footprints in the snow. None. Despite a cold winter evening with fresh snowfall on the ground, there was no visible trail leading away from the car in any direction. A police K-9 unit did pick up a scent, but only briefly. The dog tracked it roughly 100 yards east of the crash site, toward the direction of a nearby home. Then the trail stopped, completely, as though Maura Murray had simply ceased to exist at that exact point, or as though she'd gotten into a vehicle and the scent trail ended where her feet last touched the ground. No struggle, no blood, No torn clothing at the immediate scene. Nothing that confirmed violence, and nothing that confirmed she'd walked away on her own. Search teams returned with helicopters, thermal imaging cameras, snowshoe units combing the tree line for days. Cadaver dogs brought in over multiple searches across multiple years. They found nothing. Not then. Not in the weeks after. Not in the 2 decades since. A young woman vanished from a locked car on a road with no footprints leading away from it, and the only physical trace of her presence ended 90 feet into the woods, then simply disappeared. In the days after, investigators tried to reconstruct who Maura Murray really was in her final hours, and the picture only grew stranger. Months earlier, she'd used a stolen credit card number to order food, a minor fraud charge quietly working its way through the legal system, set to be dismissed if she stayed out of trouble for 90 days. Some who later studied the case believed this charge alone may have been enough to threaten her nursing career, and theorized she may have run from the fear of losing everything she'd worked for. 4 days before she disappeared, she'd had an emotional collapse during a night shift at her campus security job, reportedly following a phone call with her older sister, who was struggling with addiction. Maura was found by her supervisor completely unresponsive. When asked what was wrong, she said only 2 words: "My sister." The full content of that call would not become public for over a decade. Investigators have spent 22 years chasing 3 competing theories, and none of them have ever closed the case. The first, that Maura, disoriented and possibly intoxicated, wandered into the freezing New Hampshire wilderness and never made it out, though extensive searches across multiple years with cadaver dogs and thermal imaging have never recovered a single trace of remains. The second, that she accepted a ride from someone, willingly or by force, in the minutes between the crash and Officer Smith's arrival. A theory made more haunting by the unexplained vehicle witnesses reported seeing nose-to-nose with her car 8 minutes before any real officer reached the scene. The third, and most controversial, that Maura planned her own disappearance, the drained bank account, the false story about a death in the family, the alcohol, the directions to Vermont. All of it, some investigators argue, points to a young woman trying to vanish on her own terms, to start over somewhere no one would find her. Her father has spent more than 2 decades rejecting that theory entirely. Fred Murray believes, without hesitation, that his daughter was taken and that she is no longer alive. A private investigator hired by the family eventually reached a similar conclusion, that the most probable explanation was abduction, though not necessarily one that began as a violent one. No one has ever been named a suspect. No one has ever been charged. The case sits to this day with New Hampshire's Cold Case Unit, still open, still unsolved, still waiting on a tip that has never come. Maura Murray's car was found at 7:46 p.m. on February 9th, 2004. Empty, locked, engine cold. Her last confirmed words were a lie about a phone call that couldn't have happened. And in the 22 years since, across helicopters, cadaver dogs, FOIA requests, lawsuits, and thousands of hours of amateur investigation, not one piece of physical evidence has ever told us where she went. She is still missing. No one has ever seen her again. Nearly 2 decades later, the mystery remains unsolved.